I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about our credit work program for 2018-19 and give you a bit of detail on how we go about some of our investigations and what we're looking for and what you should be looking for yourselves if you're under investigation. So James and Crystal have just told us about responsible lending and also for the credit fees investigations. That again is going to be a key focus for us this year because we're still getting a lot of issues in this area. And as Crystal said, we've got one case going to court which might give us a wee bit more clarity. So, but James also talked about disclosure. Disclosure, again, we're seeing complaints still, and Carissa alluded to it earlier when she spoke. So we will still be investigating complaints of disclosure as they come in. And my view that disclosure isn't hard, especially the contract disclosure. You've got Schedule 1 of the CCCFA. If you just get that and read through it and tick that off against everything you've got in your contract, then you've disclosed everything that's required in Schedule 1. So it's really important that if you haven't done that, that you do it. And believe me, that isn't happening sometimes. We're still finding, as James just said and Anna alluded to as well, we're still finding mistakes in contracts. As well as those three areas, we'll be keeping a close eye on debt collection and repossession. Now, one of the main reasons here is obviously that that if someone's not taking a lot of care and sticking to proper procedures, there can be quite a lot of harm caused to people in that vulnerable position. So we are keeping a close eye on that. And we are also receiving complaints about credit-related insurance. So we'll be monitoring that this year, and we'll be taking action where we see any issues that might be arising. So some of the tools in our credit area are education and advocacy, and obviously that's why you're here today, is so that we can get across some of the messages that we want to get across. But obviously, and we would like to see full compliance in all areas of the law, but we're not going to see that, and I think it's going to take quite some time before everyone becomes reasonably compliant. Ultimately, however, our role is to enforce the law. That's really what the team that I've got in Auckland do, and across the country we have a number of others that are working in this area. And it's the CCCFA and the Fair Trading Act that we are working with. So the Commission believes that it's important that if you're under investigation, or if we contact you about an investigation, that you actually interact with us during that investigation, and also know what we expect of you. Now, how you do that is that we've got an excellent document called the Credit Competition and Consumer Investigation Guidelines. That's available on our website. I would really encourage you to have a look at that if you are under investigation, because it details all our investigation process. It also details our compulsory powers and how we can use those, and what's expected of you if you get a compulsory notice during the investigation. I think that's all I want to say there. The other one that we do have is the Enforcement Response Guidelines. These detail our investigation process, these guidelines. Again, you can find them on the website. And I'd suggest that you also download and have a look at those if you're under investigation, because the investigations, we broadly group investigations, and Carissa alluded to this before, around low-level and high-level investigations. Generally, with a high-level investigation, we will include high court injunctions, and also we often will take those to court either civilly or under the criminal procedure. The guidelines also emphasise that the Commission is willing in many cases to negotiate, to have negotiated settlements, so that's always open. But again, this means that we have to interact with you during the process to come to some of those conclusions. Carissa also mentioned about the discretion that we have in our processes, and a lot of the stuff we look at is the harm. I'm not sure if I'm on the right slide here or not. Yep. So that the harm, if it's widespread, for instance, we'll take some action. Now, mobile traders was a really good example of this, where when we did the investigation into mobile traders, we found that I think 30 out of the 31 mobile traders, there were some issues with their contracts and how they were operating. So we spent the next year trying to get those processes right and looked at their contracts. That once we went back and had another look, however, we found that some of those processes, they hadn't fixed up their contracts. So we started taking action, because the people that a lot of those mobile traders were dealing with were vulnerable people. And that is part of this harm area of the enforcement response guidelines. Now, the enforcement response guidelines are something that our staff are looking at all the time when they're writing up their reports. So they always consider, what is the harm, what is the conduct, is it deliberate, for instance, and is it repeated or ongoing, and are there other aggravating factors that are sitting within that conduct that we think really deserves us to take the matter further. The other one is the public interest, and this is mainly around public confidence and the interest of the public. Now, the other thing that we look at there also is, could we clarify the law? Now, that came down to, for instance, the sports zone was one area that we needed clarity in the fees area. So we actually went to court on that, and we got clarity, and that was really, a lot of that's in those guidelines that James was talking about before, the credit fee guidelines. So it gave us a lot of clarity, and also not just us, it gave businesses clarity as to what you should be charging. So the other things that we do is that if we decide there's not a breach, we'll always come back to you and let you know that we're going to take no further action on a complaint that we may have had. So we would encourage you as lenders to walk the talk, and Crystal and James have both said that you really need to stand back, have a look at your processes, have a look at what you're doing, your policies. Now, I've seen some policies in some organisations or some lenders have got, they're just absolutely perfect. And they're just about a rewrote of the responsible lending code when it comes to their policy around responsible lending. But when it comes to practice, they're not actually putting a lot of that into practice. So it really needs to, for you as managers or the owners of businesses, to go and have a decent look at what is actually happening in your premises all the time. Stand back, do an audit, do a check, and if you find that there's issues, take some action to sort them out, because they're just going to fester and carry on otherwise, and that's when they start coming to our attention and we need to take some action. So we just suggest you get in, take the action first, sort your businesses out, or sort out your processes. Also, check your contracts. As I said before, it's not hard to do it under the Schedule 1 of the Triple CFA. It's not hard to actually see that you've got them right.